Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Wheat harvest is winding down in Oklahoma, and it's definitely been a season of challenges, yet one we can all learn from. To help shed some light on this year's crop, we're joined by our Extension Small Grain Specialist, Jeff Edwards. And Jeff, the big question, are we almost finished with harvest?
We are almost finished. By and large, the state is completely harvested. We have a few pockets in northern Oklahoma that are still too wet to get the crop out. To add to that problem, whenever you have a really thin crop canopy as we did this year because of the drought, it allows a lot of opportunity for weeds to emerge through that canopy. So we have a lot of producers that are probably going to have to use a harvest aid and wait on that to take an effect to be able to get that crop out of the field. A prime example would be Cherokee, Oklahoma. At that location at the Mesonet site during the wheat production year from October until June 1st, we only received slightly over 5 inches of rainfall. From June 1st to June 30th, we received 10 inches. So a lot of moisture there, just too late to help out the wheat crop, and really proved a bit of a hindrance to getting the wheat crop out of the field.
We've talked a lot on SUNUP about the challenges and of course the rain we've seen in the last 6 weeks or so. How did that impact the crop overall in the state?
Well, in terms of production, it really came down to moisture this year. I have a student who's working on a project looking at our yield limitations, and he had a field of Iba that was irrigated, plenty of fertility, plenty of management, that made 113 bushels per acre. Plots in the field, same field, non-irrigated, made 51 bushels per acre. So basically you can say that our water limitations this year cost us 62 bushels per acre, and that's how severe the drought was. And most of our farmers would have been happy with the 51. Luckily at that particular site we had a lot of stored soil moisture out there that helped us make that 51 bushel crop.
Now, a big part of what you and your team do are the variety trials. What are the numbers there? What kind of things did you learn this year?
Well, we learned it's hard to grow wheat without any water. Right. The numbers were all over the board. We had a few locations that we weren't able to harvest because of the severe drought, just like our farmers across the state. We had locations that averaged around 20 bushels per acre, and then a few that averaged around 40 bushels per acre. The things that really surprised me, Lahoma and Chickasha, both of those locations averaged 43 bushels per acre, yet they only received about 7 inches of water of rainfall during the season. So we made that yield on stored soil moisture. A few other things that stood out, Iba was one of our varieties that performed very well this year, a little bit later maturing variety, but did well in the drought. And we kind of saw a resurgence of duster this year. It had been kind of off and been hanging around the middle of the pack the past couple of years, and this year it's back up near the top in the top yield grouping at many of our locations, so we've seen a resurgence of that variety in terms of yield.
What do you think it was about duster that made it kind of come back on the scene?
Well, duster is one that produces a lot of tillers, and it's a very resilient variety and has very good yield stability. And it's a variety that you can have drought stress, it can lose some tillers during the winter, and if you get just a little bit of moisture in the spring, it will have another flush of tillers and try and compensate. And it's a variety that has a lot of compensatory ability within its genetics.
Now, in terms of management practices, we're talking about this moisture conservation, and that's what it comes down to. What do producers need to be doing now that harvest is winding down as we kind of turn that corner and start looking forward to the next season?
Well, fortunately, the rainfall that we've had has been fairly slow. A lot of it is soaked in, and as illustrated by our results this year, you have to conserve every bit of moisture that you can throughout the summer. And the way you're going to do that is by limiting your tillage operations, but also having enough tillage out there, preferably shallow tillage, that does eliminate those weeds that are growing during the summer. Anytime you see green plants out there, they're pulling moisture out of the soil, and we need to control those either with herbicides or with tillage to conserve as much of that moisture as we can. For our no-till producers, hopefully we'll have quite a bit of residue out there and slow down some of that water and keep it from moving off of the field and soaking into the field, but just conserve moisture every chance you get.
And kind of see how the summer goes.
See how the summer goes. Hopefully Mother Nature will be much more cooperative next year.
Let's hope so. Jeff Edwards, our Extension Small Grain Specialist here at OSU. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. July is a month that kicks off with a bang as we celebrate Independence Day with family and friends. This July 4th, we look back on a June with above average rainfall. These are the green and blue areas on a percent of average rainfall map for the last 30 days through July 1st. The bright blue areas had close to double their normal rainfall. 4 counties had below average rainfall: Cimarron in the Panhandle, and over in the southeast, Bryan, Choctaw, and McCurtain. A map of rainfall totals over the last 30 days through July 2nd has a lot of red areas. These are the areas with 8 or more inches of rain. The highest amount of rainfall was collected at Buffalo, 10 and 93 hundredths. June rainfall hampered wheat and canola harvest, chipping away at grain quality. For summer crops, hay and pastures, the rains have been a real blessing. The percent of plant available water from the surface down to 32 inches varies widely across the state. Boise City was super dry at 9%. Another dry area is the 4 counties near Elk City. While our map suggests a lot of wetter soils, areas colored green, checking in on the actual numbers, we see a number of locations with low plant available water levels. Norman was at only 24% of its water holding capacity. Nearby at Washington, the soil had 96% of the water it can hold. A shallower percent of plant available water map from the surface down to 16 inches from July 1st had a lot more yellow colored map areas close to 50% of plant available water. We can monitor soil moisture loss on a daily basis with the Mesonet maps of evapotranspiration. On Sunday, June 30th, the water demand at Altus and Grandfield were 41 hundredths of an inch, the dark brown areas. The tan and yellow areas were close to 3/10 of an inch or higher. Water demand tapered down across the state with lows in the northeast of 16 hundredths of an inch of water. These inches of water are an estimate of the combined water lost from the soil surface by evaporation and water given off by plant leaves, referred to as transpiration. Sunday was a high water demand day in western Oklahoma. It was sunny, hot, and windy. Most of June was on the mild side. A map of days with high temperatures at or above 100 for this year is full of zeros across central and eastern Oklahoma. Altus had the highest count, 9 days of 100 or more this summer. The Mesonet Cattle Comfort Advisor puts numbers to the heat stress cattle are exposed to. Wednesday, July 2nd was a pretty mild day, yet down in the southern part of the state at 5 p.m., the Cattle Comfort Index values were close to 100 from lower wind speeds, cloudless skies, and high humidities. Hopefully your July is off to a great start. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Price of wheat's fallen over 50 cents over the past couple weeks. And Kim, are we ever going to see $7 wheat again?
Well, that's the question that most producers have been asking me, and the truthful answer is nobody knows. We've discussed this before, that it is impossible to predict prices. No one can do that.
Okay, what are you watching for in the markets right now?
Well, that's what we can watch. We can watch what's going on in the markets. We can look at the volatility to see what the prices are doing. Right now we're bidding off the September KC contract. If you look at the support prices, that price is about $6.70, $6.75 right now. It's got weak support at $6.80. and stronger support at 640, and that means that it's probably going to touch those points, bounce a little bit, and either go on down or turn back up. The resistance, in other words, if it was to turn up, it's got resistance at 7 and resistance at 740.
Okay, $6 wheat, that's kind of iffy right now. Is there a bottom with that?
Well, we don't know how low prices are going. As we've discussed before, there's a lot of wheat around the world, not much. The United States is kind of short on wheat, but the foreign wheat is abundant. You can look at last year. We had the bottom at $5.92, and for the marketing year, the top was at $8.09. If you look at the Oklahoma average monthly prices, which I think are more realistic because you're not going to hit the top or the bottom in any month. The bottom was $6.10, and that's after storage and interest was taken out, and the top was at $7.35, which was at harvest.
Okay, why are we seeing these prices right now?
Well, I think it's because of the amount of wheat that we've got in the world. If you look at foreign wheat production, last year was 24.1 billion bushels, this year 23.8, world production 26.2. Last year, 23.8 this year. Short in the U.S., 1.9 billion bushels this year, 2.1 last year. You look at our ending stock, short in the U.S., 593 million bushels last year. Remember, our average is around 700. This next year is 574. But if you look at the world, 6.2 billion bushels last year, 6.4 higher ending stocks. 6.4 billion bushels for next year.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the question that you earned the big paycheck for. What should marketing strategies be right now?
Well, I think there's some different strategies this year. One, if you can't afford any risk, you need the money, you can sell all the wheat for about $6.65, somewhere right in there. Or you can store the wheat. If you're, say, storing it till December 1, your break-even price after subtracting the storage out of it, $6.50. In other words, you've got to get at least $6.50 for it to break even with selling it today. A strategy I like this year is to sell it and buy call option contracts. A Kansas City December call option contract. Buy about a $3.90. It's going to cost you 35 cents. In that case, you're going to sell all your wheat for $6.65. You're going to subtract the 35 cents off of that, and that's $6.30 net. However, you're going to save that 15, 16 cents that you would have put into storage. You won't be spending that, so that makes your actual net around $6.45 after you. And now that's going to protect you till about November the 21st. If you want protection out into February 20th to be exact, buy a March KC 390 call. You can get that for about a nickel more. So your price is going to be minimum price $6.25. Add back on your storage save, that's $6.40, and that's going to cut. And your call will cover you until about February 20.
Okay, in all of that, I did not hear once a third, a third, and a third. Why not?
Well, I think you've got other options. Me personally, I would probably go with a third and a third and a third because that's what I do every year. That's what I'm comfortable with, and that's going to give me dollar cost averaging.
Okay, Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Recently, a cow-calf producer emailed a question about the effects of hot summer temperatures on bull fertility. They had experienced quite a drop in their calf crop percentage last year due to the breeding season of 2012 and wanted to know if possibly that extreme heat that we experienced here in the southern plains may have affected bull fertility. Well, there's been research that's been done looking at the impact of heat stress on bulls. This is one example that you see on the screen where some bulls down at Fort Reno a number of years ago were either left in a thermal neutral environment, that's something about 70 degrees around the clock, and half of the bulls were put under heat stress. Not too dissimilar of what we might see in July and August when we get those days that are 105 degrees and overnight lows only drop down to about 80. What you see is a decrease in the percent motile sperm cells that those bulls under heat stress were producing. And this continued until the heat insult was taken away or the bulls were put back into that thermal neutral, that cool environment. The other part of the story that's important important for producers to remember is once the bulls got back into a cool environment, it took about 8 weeks for them to return totally to normal again in terms of fertility. Now, I think here in Oklahoma, when we have some of these hot summer temperatures, it can affect the percent that the cows will get bred due to the impact on the bulls of the heat stress. I don't think that it's going to be a situation where it's all or nothing. We'll probably just see a reduction in the percent calf crop rather than an entire wipeout or complete sterility of the bulls. But I think you want to keep this in mind as you're thinking about breeding seasons on your operation. We'd like to get that spring breeding season over with before the extreme heat in July and August, or move our breeding season to a fall breeding season where we're breeding in late November, December, and January, where heat stress is not an issue. Keep this in mind. It's a factor that determines whether we're going to have a really good calf crop percentage each year, or whether it's going to be a lower percentage or a real strung out long calving season just due to the impacts of heat on the bulls. Hope this helps you to better understand that physiology of what's taking place in these hot summer days. We look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We want to talk a little bit about managing canola after harvest with our stored products engineer, Carol Jones. And Carol, like wheat, canola harvest is winding down, and there are some things for producers to think about.
There are. Canola is a fairly new crop for Oklahoma. It's been in the state about 10 years, but this year we had remarkable interest in growing canola, and we've had a pretty good harvest in most parts of the state. But it's much different than handling wheat. We're learning some new tricks, and we're doing some research on some other new tricks here at OSU to help the industry in Oklahoma become more mature, and being able to store canola in Oklahoma is a part of that maturity of this industry.
And in terms of storing it, how is it different than wheat?
Well, canola is a little over a third oil. So every time you picture a handful of canola, just picture a third of that being exactly like the oil you buy off the grocery shelf. A third of it would be that oil. So oil and heat don't mix too well. And when we harvest canola in Oklahoma, it's about 90 degrees. So that oil can go rancid if we don't handle that crop appropriately. Where wheat, we can put it in the bin and it's stable. Canola, not so much. It goes through about another 3 to 4 weeks of a sweat period where it will actually heat itself. So we've got both the temperature outside being 90 to 100 degrees, plus the product itself heating itself. So we've got a real potential for rancidity to build, and we have to take some precautions to keep that from happening.
So if I'm a producer who's going to store my canola on my place, what kind of options do I have?
Well, there's 3 options. First of all, you can sell it directly to the buyer and just not have to worry about storage, and that's probably what most of the producers have done in the past few years. But as we get more information, we found out that we can put aeration in a steel bin, much like we have in the background here, and put air through that product and cool it off and keep it stable until time to store it. We've also got some research considering putting canola in grain bags. We've had good examples of that out in the field, but we'd like to find some better alternatives where it doesn't take up so much land and so many resources, but put the canola directly into a grain bag, seal it up, and it's going to be good 4 or 5 months from now to sell.
And you mentioned the research, so there's more to study.
There is much more to study. We've had some really good support from the Oilseed Commission and from some of our other granting agencies, and we've got some extensive research that's really pretty groundbreaking research here at OSU.
To learn more about that work, we turn to research engineer Kevin Moore.
Yeah, so Oklahoma has been coming a long way in the production of canola. We're the second largest producer of canola in the United States. So it's important for us to be able to figure out how we can continue to develop this crop in Oklahoma. But Oklahoma's hot, and most of the storage guidelines for canola are based on a northern climate where the temperatures are cooler. So we're always trying to deal with how can we prevent damage to the crop while it's being stored in these high temperatures. A lot of farmers have bins at their farm that they want to be able to utilize. And so the question is, how long can they store it without having problems with the canola And are there other options that they could use for trying to extend the length of time that they could store the canola and the quality of the canola during the time that it's in storage?
To solve this problem, the team is looking to repurpose existing technology.
One of the ways that people have looked at storing canola is using grain bags, and this is an example of material that is utilized for grain bag storage. And these are usually spread out in large cocoons in a field, and the canola is put inside, and it's basically an air-free environment that helps to prevent breakdown of the material while it's in storage. And we wanted to look into seeing if this material could be utilized within a bin that didn't have aeration. So that's not usually an ideal situation for storing canola without aeration. But if we could find a way to utilize those bins that are already in place, then in certain situations where perhaps a farmer doesn't have a large area to lay down a grain bag, they might be able to utilize some of the existing infrastructure that they have in their current grain bins, utilizing some material like this in order to extend the amount of time and the quality of their product whenever they pull it out of storage.
While this research is just getting started, the team does have resources available that can help canola producers today.
We've got an extensive fact sheet collection. One talks about the moisture content and the temperature management of canola. We also have a growing guide. It was produced in collaboration with Kansas State University, and those are all available through OSU and through our website.
Okay, terrific. Thanks a lot. Carol Jones, our stored products engineer.
Thanks, Rachel.
And for a link to that website, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Joining us now to talk about drill performance, Randy Taylor, agricultural engineer here at Oklahoma State. Randy, let's talk about, first of all, why it's important to really get that drill set up and take a little bit of time with it before you hit the field.
Well, I think if you want to talk about taking your wheat production to the next level, okay, if I'm really going to start managing a little more intensely, then I think you got to look at what we're putting in the ground with. Certainly with our row crops, we do that. I mean, we focus on planter adjustment and maintenance and all those things, and I think we need to think about the same thing with drills.
All right, so where do we start?
Well, first thing I would start is I would just look at, if we're running a fluted feed type metering system, is I would just index all my cups to make sure each row is putting out the same amount. So there can be some minor differences with how these cups are set, and so I would check that first and just make sure that that I'm doing a good job of metering what I want to meter, when I'm in the field. So if that's 75 pounds to the acre, if it's 90, 120, or 60, whatever it is, make sure that I know what I'm putting out. And also pay attention to seed size. If I got a lot smaller seed and as opposed to larger seed, then it may not be exactly metering the same amount with the same settings.
Right.
So those are things to think about for sure.
All right, so that's here. So we get down, down to the ground. Let's talk about the parts here.
The first thing I'm going to think about is down pressure. Do I have enough force on my row units? Because as we do less and less tillage, then keeping the unit engaged in the ground is really important. Because I think if we look at studies that have gone on or that we've had at Oklahoma State in the Plant and Soil Science Department, they look at seeding depth, then most farmers are not planting at the depth they think they are. They're almost always planting a little bit shallower. And so if I talk to a farmer and he tells me he's planting at 1.5 inches, I'm probably thinking 1.25 inches, So there's certainly some differences there. So trying to make sure that you're planting at the right depth is going to be really important. And a lot of that may come from downforce. That as we get into firmer soils that are not tilled as much, then if we're not adjusting our downforce, then we may not be actually pushing it in the ground
far enough,
like we want. Right. So that's certainly one thing. And if I'm going to err with downforce, I certainly would like to err on the side of having too much, as opposed to not enough. Because not enough will cause that inconsistent depth placement, and so I think a little bit more. Now, it'd be nice if we could say, oh, I need 75 pounds, or in this field I need 100 pounds of downforce. But it's not that. You have enough to keep it in the ground and get the depth, get the seed at the depth that you want. That's the important thing. Checking it. Get off the tractor and look.
All right, so what else down here?
Well, and another thing, I'd look at the opener disc, because as you look at your soil engaging components, make sure that they're sitting right. And then with our drills, just the same as our planters, the drill needs to be set at the right frame height, as well as it needs to be level. If the drill's not level, then those opener discs may be kind of pointed down a little bit too much, or they may be kind of pointed up a little bit too much, and they're not actually engaging the soil where they were designed to. So making sure that the drill is level to start with, and making sure that the opener discs are in good shape. You know, we certainly, if we have any residue at all that we're going to deal with, then we want that drill to be able to cut through the residue, and not hairpin it down and just push it down in the slot. And so making sure that we're engaging the residue with the disc in the right place, as well as having, you know, the opener disc in good shape and sharp. I think those are some real basic keys.
All right. Randy Taylor, agricultural engineer here at Oklahoma State University.
There's a new face on the OSU campus and in Ag Hall, Dr. Thomas Kuhn. He's heading up the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources.
Oklahoma State has a wonderful reputation, certainly in Oklahoma, but I think people don't realize how solid that reputation is across the country. The way we serve students, the kind of research that's going on here, the way we're connected with communities across the state through Extension. This is a special place, and I consider it a great honor to be here, to be part of this university, and to have the opportunity to serve this industry. My father-in-law was a cattleman, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, but if there is anything out there beyond our mortal selves, I think he's pretty happy right now, because this is the kind of country he'd be really happy in.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube and other social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.